about the new qualification, which we'll then hear from Crystal about all the juicy details. So Zoe.
Thank you, Gareth. So yes, as you probably may know, that the AAT, we do change the qualification every few years, and that's just to make sure that it reflects the emerging needs of the employers, and also to make sure that the technical knowledge that we teach your trainees is up to date, and reflects what it is that the industry wants trainee accountants to be learning, and to give them the right knowledge that they need, and just to make sure that it is fit for purpose. And so sometimes those changes to the qualification can be quite minimal, sort of learning outcomes moved or expanded upon, or new things introduced. But this qualification is quite a substantial change. And our approach to the change of this qualification and the development of it was slightly different, in that we looked at all three levels. So we took the level 2, level 3 and level 4, and we looked at them alongside each other. And by doing that, we were able to take a much more holistic approach to the way that we adapted and changed the qualification. And that included removing some of the repetition, so some of the content that was repeated at different levels, so we deleted that. And also just making sure there was a clear progression of knowledge and competency as a student would move from one level to the next. So as well as being important for us to be able to develop the key accounting and bookkeeping knowledge and concepts of management accounting and financial accounting. So that would be introducing at level 2, the foundation knowledge that they would need, and then expanding upon that at level 3. And then as they moved into level 4, the qualification at level 4 would then do a further sort of analysis and application of that knowledge at that higher level. So it's a real gradual increase, building on the knowledge that would have been learnt from the level below. And as well as doing that within the accounting elements of that, by working with the employers, particularly of the work that we did with building the Trailblazer, so that the apprenticeship standards and the greater amount of input that we had from employers about what it was that they wanted trainees to be learning, not just those accounting concepts, but other elements that were important skills for trainees to have. We have also incorporated 4 new key themes, or extended those themes, of technology, ethics, sustainability and communication. And Crystal's going to talk about that in a bit more detail to take us through that. But again, with those themes, it's about introducing it at level 2, building on it at level 3, and expanding further the development of that at level 4. So for the qualification, it was due to be launched in September 21. Which is normally when you do launch a new qualification, we bring it out at the beginning of an academic year. But this year's been a little bit different because of the fact that everything went on hold for so long, and with the challenges that our students and our training providers had to deal with the pandemic. We listened to the feedback from our training providers, and they just asked that it be postponed to now enable them time to be able to move their training to online and focus on the here and now challenges they had, so they could postpone preparing for the changing qualifications a little further down the line. So that's why Quals 21 then became Quals 22. So we pushed it out by 5 months, which will then be launched in February 22. And we do appreciate that whilst that was sort of meeting the needs of our training providers and the students at that current time, that does then have implications in itself as to the decisions that you make around the training programs that you're going to have, and at what point you're going to change over your delivery from one qualification to the next. But that's why FI are providing this wonderful opportunity to talk through with you what your options are and kind of give you that guidance. From an AAT perspective, we had various people involved with the development of the qualification. We had employers, industry experts, lead writers, and actually Crystal was one of those key unit writers that was very involved with the development and had a lot of input into that. So she's very, very well placed to be able to provide that guidance for you, and then to be able to go into a bit more detail about what those changes are. So just as Gareth said, we've not had final sign-off for everything. So if there is anything that we're not able to give you the answers of, then I'm going to put my email address in the chat box. So feel free to contact me about anything. If you want to share your email address, I'll be happy to follow up on anything we're not able to confirm today. So yeah, I'll hand over to Crystal.
Well, I might just chip in actually quickly, Zoe. So thanks for that. Thanks for joining us and that introduction. And you know, I'm sure people will be glad to be able to contact you. And I've just put my email in the chat box as well. So if anyone's got any questions, I mean, this will probably sow some seeds for some of you to mull over. So everyone's aware, we are going to record this session because although we're running a few of these sessions over a few weeks, I think with the challenges of juggling homeschooling kids and stuff, not everyone's going to be able to attend live. So we are going to make a recording available for those that can't attend live. But I'm now going to hand over to, and as Zoe said, I mean, you know, Crystal has been, I think, one of the most influential people within First Intuition actually over the last decade. She led our original development of our AAT program. She led our introduction of apprenticeships. She's been involved with the AAT writing this new qualification. So she was also on the Trailblazer group for the level 2 standard, which actually we will mention as this call progresses. So my view is if Crystal doesn't know the answer, then there probably isn't an answer yet. So, you know, please use the chat box. If any of you have got questions, drop them into the chat box. If you've got any comments or observations just on how you think this might affect you, that would be equally interesting to hear. As I said, we're looking to get as much feedback from employers as we are trying to give facts over. But I'm now going to hand over to Crystal.
Lovely, thanks very much, Gareth. Good morning, everyone. I'm going to take you through a bit of an overview to start with on what Quals 22 is looking like. As part of that, I'll point out some of the stuff that's new. We'll then have a look at what's changing. I think it's important to see the differences between the current qualification and the new one. But please do pop any questions that you have in the chat box as we're going through. So Gareth, if you wouldn't mind keeping an eye on the chat box and just let me know if there's anything that you want me to cover.
I will do, and what I might also do, Crystal, because you can't keep me quiet for too long, is I might chip in periodically just with my thoughts on the implications of some of the changes that you're going through, if that's okay.
I would expect nothing less. Absolutely. I would say just bear with me. I've shared my screen with you, so hopefully we can all see that okay. We're all good if someone can give me a thumbs up. Lovely. So just a few key dates to start with. As Zoe mentioned there, the qualifications was Quals 21. It's now pushed forward to Quals 22. I'm very grateful for that extra time for us to be able to prepare and also to prepare our employers. So the 31st of January 2022 will be the last date at which you can register students under the current syllabus. So anyone starting up until that point registering with AAT, it will be under AQ 16. So from the 1st of February, every new student will register for the new qualification. So there's no overlap at all. There isn't a period in which students can decide which qualification they want to register for. One switches off and the new one switches on. Now, there is a period of time for which AQ 16 will still be available for students who are already registered to complete their assessments and finish their exams. So we've got until the 28th of February 2023. So we've got 13 months for students to be able to complete the level that they're on. So we would want students to complete their current level in that period under AQ 16, and then they can move on to Quals 22 for their next level. Now, there will be some students in that period who will want to transfer from AQ 16 to Quals 22. Could be for a number of reasons: to align with colleagues, for the relevant and more up-to-date qualification that they can have with Quals 22. There are transitional arrangements. So if some exams have been completed under AQ 16, they will transfer over to Quals 22. It's not like for like, and there are areas where it doesn't transfer over and there's additional exams that will need to be sat, or there's no equivalent that it will map to. So I'm not going to go into the detail on the transitional arrangements, but that is something that we have information about, and we can sort of address any issues or deal with queries as they come up.
And just in terms of things that occur to me, I don't know if you can just go back to that previous slide actually, Crystal, because I mean, one thing for employers to be aware of is candidates you are recruiting and interviewing in the next few weeks will at some point end up on Quals 22, because they don't have enough time to complete the entire AAT qualification under the current syllabus. So I know this feels like a long time away, and in fact, I sometimes think next week feels like a long time away, but this will affect recruitment in the coming weeks. Those candidates will end up on Quals 22 at some point. For me, particularly, it's this issue of if you are likely to have a split intake. I know there's a lot of employers in the call who haven't brought their AAT students in until maybe this month or even March of this year. If that happens again next year, you can imagine if you bring in an intake where you've got some students starting, say, in September, October of this year, but some not starting until, say, February, March of 2022, you may end up with effectively one intake split across two qualifications. You might have some on AQ 2016, some on this Quals 22. And then for me, the particular question is going to arise around if students start in January of next year, so January 22, in theory, if they register in January, they've still got to do it on AQ 2016, but then that qualification only lasts till February of 2023. That's only 13 months, which, as some of you will be aware, that's not really enough time to get an apprenticeship done up to Gateway and then EPA. And so for me, there's a particular issue around what if we have apprentices starting next January? You know, potentially we should push them into February so that they can then just start on Quals 22 and then just do the whole qualification under that qualification. As Crystal has said, there is going to be transitional arrangements, so they can potentially do part of a level under the current qualification and then part under the new qualification. But that's where you're going to potentially end up seeing some knowledge gaps arising, which we do need to be aware of. But Crystal, sorry, back to you.
That's great, thanks, Gareth. So an overview of how the qualification is looking. You can see at the bottom on this slide, I've put the 4 themes that run across the whole qualification. So AAT have taken the approach to sort of integrate these themes across all levels. We've got technology, and that's very new. I mean, we had certain hints on technology. We had using accounting software, and we had our spreadsheets units under AQ 16, but there's much more focus on the technology that's used by an accountant in the modern world, and that's introduced at level 2. It's focused on much more significantly at level 3, and then also filters through that knowledge into level 4 as well. It was recognised that communication is a really important skill, and having taught AAT for quite some time, through levels 2 and level 3 currently, there's very little written response that's expected from a learner. So when they get to level 4, having to produce a written response in assessments has been really challenging, and particularly for those students that are moving on to higher qualifications, they perhaps haven't had enough experience at writing long form answers, and therefore communication from a written perspective, as well as understanding the communication that needs to take place throughout an organisation, has been filtered through all 3 levels. Ethics has always been there. It was tested on its own at level 3. Very briefly, it used to be introduced at level 2. It's now got much more emphasis at level 2, understanding and knowing the basics. It's developed through level 3, and at level 4, being able to apply ethics across all of the papers, but in particular the internal systems and controls. The kind of knowledge is built much more throughout, and sustainability was very light touch through AQ 16, and it has been much more integrated through the qualification now as well. So we've got these slides. I will send them, or we'll make sure they're sent round to you afterwards. There is an additional slide that's got a little bit more information about these themes, but I won't go into any more detail than that for now. But looking at how the qualification looks, you can see I've kind of separated it out into these columns, which show how the levels build on each other. So we've got at level 2, the business environment. Knowledge and understanding there feeds through into business awareness, provides the basic grounding to move on. Business awareness provides those foundations for internal accounting systems. We've then got our costing kind of column, our financial accounting, and then tax and the optional papers at the end there. So level 2 consists of 4 papers, or 4 units now. We've got those 2 bookkeeping units: Introduction to Bookkeeping, Principles of Bookkeeping Controls. not hugely different to what we've seen. I think some of you use that current bookkeeping qualification, the certificate in bookkeeping, as a bit of a stepping stone into level 3 currently, and those 2 units are still there. There's been a few changes, a little bit of a removal of duplication of learning and testing, and the 2 modules have been balanced out a little bit more. Principles of costing is very similar to what we've seen before, although we do have the spreadsheets in there in a much more significant way. And we've also, a few little things have moved around between level 2 and level 3 on that costing paper. The new paper at level 2 is, or the new unit is the business environment. And this gives an introduction to the internal and the external business environment, and really is designed to give learners an understanding of business structures, their reason for existence, and how they exist in that competitive environment. So we've got a little bit of economics in there, ethics is brought in, functional structures, and our sustainability as well as communication. So really give an understanding of a way in which a business operates and runs. So a little bit different to what we've currently got at level 2. We've no longer got the using accounting software. I think quite a few employers didn't do full level 2, just the bookkeeping units, because they seemed most relevant. Perhaps you had your own accounting software that you used and therefore didn't need that using accounting software. And the working effectively in accounting and finance has gone. Quite a lot of that content has been absorbed into the business environment, but there's a lot more in there now than there was before. And although using accounting software is gone, technology is covered in the business environment. So an introduction to the kind of technology that you would see as part of a finance role. Any questions or anything you want to add, Gareth, before I talk about level 3?
Yeah, I mean, you know, for me, the thing around level 2 is the introduction, and I'm sure a lot of people on the call will recognise, the value of the AAT qualification. I think one of the reasons that we've seen this shift away from graduates to school leavers is there's a real question around this graduate premium that you pay for somebody who's been to university when they don't actually really know anything. And even, I think, relevant graduates, if they've done an accounting degrees, we see relevant graduates who've never seen debits and credits. Whereas, if somebody does AAT, they're going to see their debits and credits. When I'm teaching, final level chartered, you can always tell which students did AAT because they still remember how to do a journal to clear a suspense account. They still remember those fundamentals. And, for me, this qualification is a great development because it's retaining those fundamental technical skills of accountancy, but it's then bringing in things like this business environment and business awareness at level 3. It's bringing in this more commercial awareness that, I hear from a lot of employers. They're expecting their school leavers to be talking to clients within weeks of starting work, and advising clients. So they need to have some of those broader understandings of how businesses work. So I think that's a really positive development. I think these 4 themes, we all, I'm sure, recognise how important technology is, communication. I mean, I hear endlessly how important communication skills are, sustainability, ethics, obviously massive themes, even at the higher level qualifications. So to me, the challenge is that the level 2 is going to embed some of these real basics much more than it perhaps does currently. And at the moment, we don't get that many students who do full level 2. Some go in at direct entry at level 3 and don't do level 2 at all. Some only do that certificate in bookkeeping that you mentioned, Crystal. I think we're going to see a much stronger argument for students doing perhaps the entirety of level 2, unless they've got, as we'll discuss later, some relevant previous academic experience.
Definitely. Zoe, did you? Yeah, it was just a small point really, just to cut, the using accounting software. Whilst we have removed that, as Crystal has said, so it won't be actually assessed using an accounting software package. There's no specific unit around that. We do still hope that, or expect the training providers to be able to refer quite a lot through both introducing bookkeeping and principles of bookkeeping controls to digitalised accounting systems and various computer software packages, and how you would process transactions using a software package, and whether that's referring directly to maybe the packages, the in-house packages that are being used, and getting the students to talk about that, or taking them through a system like Xero or Sage. We do still hope that training will take place in order to be able to sort of put into context how computerized accounts works in relation to the theory around the manual bookkeeping as well that they'll be learning. So it's been removed in that it's not a standalone tested qualification, but we do still hope that training will take place.
I can see James, hi James, has already asked effectively the million-dollar question around all of this, which is what would doing maybe all of level 2, or at least a proportion of level 2, do to the overall timescale for students getting through their AAT, because we see a lot of our employers who do effectively various fast track approaches to AAT, either only doing the level 2 certificate in bookkeeping before they go to level 3. That's maybe 3 or 4 months before they go on to level 3. Some direct entry at level 3, so skip level 2 altogether, which currently kind of works all right if you've got bright students, and some don't even do all of level 3. Some do a sort of shortcut level 3 before they move on to level 4. Now, one of the things Crystal's already mentioned, which I think is a key takeaway from this morning, is that there's a removal of a lot of the duplication of content and testing that we currently see. At the moment, if students come straight in at level 3 and they've never seen double entry, not that big a problem, because we teach them it at level 3 and they get tested on it at level 3. If students go in at level 4 having never really seen costing before, it's not a big problem because we teach them it at level 4. A lot of that duplication is being removed, so I think it's going to affect some of these fast track approaches unless you've got students who perhaps do have some kind of technical academic background in debits and credits or costing. But Crystal will pick up on that as we progress. So we'll certainly be looking at that, James.
Lovely, thanks. A really good point there, Zoe, as well. So yeah, it is that expectation of understanding how all of these operations work actually in practice using technology really is tested through level 2 and level 3. So understanding that accounting software is definitely important. So at level 3, we've seen quite a lot of change, really. We've got this new unit, which is business awareness, builds on the business environment, really gives a good understanding of ethics and how to apply ethics, and really takes a lot of the content that we saw before in the standalone ethics module and builds it into this business awareness unit. There's again some law, some economics, there's sustainability, technology is in here, and also communication, the ability to be able to analyse data and to be able to visualise and communicate key points, which is a really important skill in today's business world and that changing role in finance. The management accounting techniques has changed a little bit. There's a few things sort of technically that have changed, but not significant. The most significant change that we've seen at level 3 is that we've currently got these 2 papers that look at financial accounting. So our advanced bookkeeping and final accounts preparation. Those 2 have been combined into final accounting. There have been a couple of bits that have been moved around, either moved to level 2 or moved across to business awareness, but it is a big unit. There is a lot of content in there.
I've heard that described as a beast more than once.
Yeah, I would definitely agree with that. It is a beast of a paper. For those who have done level 2 or have done some other qualification or training in relation to accounting and bookkeeping, entry into that paper would be appropriate. But for someone new to accounting or new to bookkeeping, coming in at that final accounting paper, I think is going to be more challenging than the current AQ16.
So yeah, the advanced bookkeeping is often the first paper we'll put students onto at level 3, isn't it, currently? And you've now got this beast of a paper that's effectively 2 syllabuses combined, which we normally spend 4 months basically taking students through currently. And again, I'm a bit concerned about, you've got these youngsters who haven't sat a formal exam for potentially a couple of years with all these cancellations of GCSEs and A-levels. If they're brought in as a direct entry at level 3 with no double entry background, which is relatively common now and they kind of cope, that's going to be a really tough ask, I think.
Yeah, definitely. I think it's one that really is going to influence decisions as to those entry points of learners, what we expect them to have done before, and perhaps what level we're going to bring them in at. Definitely tax processes. So currently indirect tax, this unit is very similar, except we've got some payroll basics in there as well, which I think is a really good introduction into the qualification. It does only go into the basics, but gives a good understanding of those payroll taxes. At level 4, we've again seen some quite significant change at level 4. We've still got our final accounts, so drafting, interpreting financial statements. A few changes. We always expect on any syllabus change there will be technical content that is being updated to reflect new standards and new techniques, or those that perhaps are no longer needed or used. So there's a few changes, but not significant. The one where there is the most significant change is this applied management accounting. Currently at level 4, we've got budgeting and decision and control. So 2 management accounting papers. These have been combined into one. We have lost some of the technical content. So there did used to be quite a bit of stuff that was duplicated of the learning, and there were some sort of techniques that have been moved down to the level 3. But there's, as well as combining budgeting and decision and control, there's been a whole load of new content into this applied management accounting. So we've got some long-term making some MPBs and things like that. We've got some linear programming in there. We've got divisional performance appraisal. So all new, quite hefty topics, which currently we kind of see those topics come up at mid-level ACCA. So in performance management, they're now going to be tested at level 4 from AAT, not to the same extent, but the basics and the understanding of those texts are now pulled into the qualification. So I would definitely call this one a beast as well. It is a big paper.
And again, for me, one of the implications of that is particularly where we have employers who use a fast track, particularly if they're not doing all of level 3, which sometimes means they're not doing that management accounting costing paper at level 3. So the first time they would see any costing, the first time they'd even hear of a direct cost would be at level 4, when they do what is currently the budgeting paper, which is actually all right, because the budgeting papers is quite a nice syllabus, it's quite a nice assessment, it's a good introduction to level 4. Whereas under the new qualification, these students are going to come into this other beast of a paper, which is almost up to ACCA performance management level. And if those students coming in without the background of costing built at level 3, and I think possibly even down at level 2, they're going to find that really challenging.
Definitely, and that nice introduction that we used to have with budgeting just isn't going to be possible anymore. The other changes in internal accounting systems and controls, this module or this unit I think has been improved significantly. So a lot of the assessment criteria qualification spec has been expanded and has a lot more content to it now. I think it's the ability to be able to test integrated skills much better, and definitely builds on that knowledge that's learned at the business awareness paper now in level 3. Optional papers still the same, so still got the choice of 2 from 5. There's been a few tweaks and changes in all of those, but no huge or significant changes. Still the same approach for choosing which optional papers to do. Overall, I think we've got a qualification that's much more relevant to the actual roles that we would expect learners to be in. So right through from level 2 to level 4, it really does reflect the kinds of activities and tasks that someone in a finance role would be involved in or would need to understand about your clients. And it's certainly going to provide us with learners who are in a much better position if they move on to a higher qualification as well. As a tutor currently, if a student in class has done AAT, I'm very confident in their abilities at those higher level papers. I think this is going to make that even more significant. They're going to have a much better grounding understanding of those core techniques.
Absolutely. I mean, I think you're looking at a good step forward for the qualification, maintaining its technical robustness, but bringing in, some other key areas. I think students going from this on to the higher level qualifications will probably find an easier transition, because fundamentally the AAT qualification is going to be more demanding and more challenging, and it should ingrain some of those basic skills better. And coming back to James's point, realistically, if students don't have the kind of double entry background from maybe an accounting A-level or a business studies A-level, probably it's going to end up taking longer to get through the AAT qualification. And I know for some employers, they're quite keen on making sure they can maintain a certain length through AAT. Although bear in mind, this is affecting everyone. So it's not like one employer is going to suddenly have to spend longer training AAT and nobody else is. So you're going to, have problems competing for recruitment. This is affecting everyone. The alternative is you bring people in who are unprepared for a fast track approach and they end up failing exams, which is then going to take them longer, isn't it? So just trying to balance making sure that you've got a process that will take students through the qualification as effectively as possible.
I'm sure what's really important to you is, well, if we're recruiting, what are we looking for? So what level of qualifications do we need? What experiences do we need? What level should we be starting our new intake at? So we're going to have a look at that. But before I do, I just want to introduce to you the level 2 apprenticeship. So we've been, just because it seems it's appropriate and relevant perhaps for some learners, we've been delivering level 3 and 4 under the standards since they started. Level 2 was available under the old framework, but it's been a bit later, a bit delayed in being available as a standard. So I worked with Zoe as part of the Trailblazer group in the development of the level 2 standard. It was a long process. It was by no means quickly. There was an awful lot of research done into the industry, talking to employers and considering those job roles for a level 2 candidate. Let me flip through to the right slide that's got the level 2 on it. So we've got the level 2 standard. It's got to take at least 12 months. So we're looking at a programme that's 13 or 14 months. As part of the level 2 standard, a qualification is mandated, and AAT is one of those qualifications. So I think the Quals 22 qualification really fits nicely with the apprenticeship standard at level 2. It really supports the skills and behaviours that form part of that apprenticeship. So on the screen now is just a bit of an overview. I will send these around to you, but I'm not going to go through the detail of the level 2 apprenticeship, other than it's 13 to 14 months. It includes that qualification, and as the EPA is very similar to what we currently see. There's an in-tray assessment and there's a structured interview with a portfolio. What's really useful to highlight at this point is, from an apprenticeship point of view, Quals 22 is going to work differently. If we look at what the assessments are, currently under AQ 16 at levels 2, 3 and 4, we have a synoptic assessment that's part of the qualification, and it is the EPA. Under Quals 22, we do have a synoptic paper at level 2, but we don't have a synoptic unit or synoptic assessment at level 3 and 4. For all 3 levels under Quals 22, the whole qualification will need to be completed on programme. None of those assessments will form part of the EPA. The EPA will sit outside of the qualification, and the EPA at levels 3 and 4 will be what's currently used for the level 3 and level 4 synoptic assessment, that current EPA at level 4. There will be, as AAT always does, reviews and updates to make sure that it's relevant for the standard and for the apprentices learning. At level 2, it's an in-tray test. So some things will change in the number of assessments that, well, the assessments that will be sat for our apprentices. Thinking about just the qualification, at level 2, we're going to reduce down from 5 under AQ 16 to 4 under Quals 22. So when we have the EPA on top, that will still be 5 assessments for our apprenticeship. So they're not going to be expected to do more exams, but they will be doing more than someone who does the qualification only. At level 3, currently they sit 5 assessments. That's going to go down to 4 assessments. And so the EPA will be sat on top of that, the synoptic. So apprentices will still do 5, still a like for like. And the same at level 4, we've got 1 assessment less. So going from 4 core down to 3 core assessments. And then those apprentices will do their synoptic for EPA as well.
So I guess given the huge popularity of apprenticeships and the proportion of our AAT students that are on apprenticeships, for the majority of students it's going to be kind of similar to the current programme, that they will need to do a synoptic at all 3 levels as part of their EPA. It's just for non-apprentices where they do crop up, they won't have that additional synoptic at levels 3 and 4, so there will be 1 less paper at those levels. And actually, I mean, going back to the level 2 point, we haven't seen a huge uptake in level 2 apprenticeships. In fact, we don't even deliver them at the moment because so few of our students do the whole of level 2. These various fast track or direct at level 3 entries are quite common at the moment. We can see that level 2 apprenticeship standard being far more appealing. If you're going to do all of level 2, which looks like it's going to be more appropriate for a majority of students, then why wouldn't you do it as an apprenticeship where you can get another element of funding to support the training? The downside of that, again, and back to James's question, is that doing it as an apprenticeship gives a minimum time scale on level 2. So I know some employers are going to be more interested in doing a commercial level 2 that can be done far more condensed, maybe over, I don't know, 4 to 6 months rather than your 13 or 14 months over an apprenticeship. But again, those skills, you think, I was hearing from an employer a couple of weeks ago saying that, they've just taken on a newbie who cannot stand in a room and talk to people because they've been in their bedroom for 12 months, learning virtually. They're just some of those really basic communication skills are just going to be lacking, I think, in the next year or 2. And again, that level 2 apprenticeship, as a lot of you will know, the apprenticeships, the real secret sauce in apprenticeships is these additional skills and behaviours they build, including communication, professional working, team working. So, I can see actually not just from a funding perspective, I can see that making, at least in the short term, the level 2 standard a lot more appealing for this sort of, I think of them as the COVID cohort of youngsters we're going to be recruiting in the next year or 2.
Definitely. So that leads us in quite nicely to thinking about where should we start learners? So looking at new recruits, where should they start their journey with AAT? Or from kind of the other side, we're looking to recruit, what are we looking for based on what we want that learner journey to look like? So there is no hard and fast rules. There are no kind of exemptions that are offered if you've got GCSE or A-level in business or maths or accounts. But what we have done is pull together this slide, which gives a little bit of a flow through what kind of qualifications we might see coming through on CVs or our new recruits might have, where might be an appropriate place for them to start. So this is based on our
Can I just say we're going to circulate the slides, so please don't feel you need to start frantically scribbling down what is quite a lot of information here. Crystal's put an awful lot of work and effort into kind of constructing this flowchart, but I am going to circulate the slides along with the recording.
Yeah, definitely. And this is just a thought, an opinion, an idea based on knowledge. So this is by no means, this is the route that has to be taken by learners. So each individual, it's definitely you need to consider what their experiences are and what qualifications they have and at what level they've achieved those. So based on our knowledge of the content of the AAT syllabus, plus what we know the average A-level GCSE in these areas consists of. There is quite a lot of variation, particularly in business studies at A-level. The different awarding bodies or the different exam boards have quite different content, but kind of generally looking at what's usually included. If we're looking at taking on recruit with A-levels and they have an A-level in accounting or business studies, just going through the top of the diagram here, if they've got accounting or business studies, we need to be really considering, are they a high achiever? Because business studies does include a lot of that core basics that's in level 2, and even some of the knowledge that we would see at level 3 on AAT. If they're a high achiever, so looking at someone who is your kind of A-star student, they've done business studies at A-level, we would possibly be looking at starting them at level 3, maybe with the bookkeeping units included, because they possibly haven't covered double entry bookkeeping to quite the same degree. Someone who maybe hasn't achieved quite such a good grade, we might look at, are there other units from level 2 that we want to include? So particularly thinking about the costings module there. Someone who's done A-level accounting, again, looking at what level they're achieving at and whether we could fast track them. Someone who has done A-level accounting is a particularly high achiever, so that alongside others, so this could be an equivalent to maybe a BTEC, something like that as well. They may be appropriate to fast track into level 4. So rather than doing a level 3 apprenticeship and then a level 4, we might have a condensed level 3 moving into level 4 because their knowledge will be better, and they'll have an element of business understanding. For those that perhaps haven't achieved quite such a high grade, we'd need to be considering, if they're going to start at level 3, do we need to include anything from level 2? So have they had a lower grade at A-level because they haven't grasped the basics of double entry bookkeeping, in which case some level 2 units might be appropriate to include. I know it's been mentioned that we don't, sort of A-level in accounting is fairly rare, few and far between for colleges that actually offer it. So if we've got learners who have maybe done economics, maths, or they are just generally high achievers and their A-levels included some of kind of business studies, economics, then we might put them into that category of high achiever and consider them for a direct entry into level 3. For those that haven't achieved A-levels and have done GCSEs, if they've done accounts and business studies, we maybe want to start them at level 2, might just be the bookkeeping, moving into level 3, depending on whether it's that accounting or business studies, where there might be knowledge gaps. But we're really going to need to consider what knowledge gaps are there based on those GCSEs that they've done, and how can we use those units and find that right entry point for them, whether that is at level 2 or at level 3 with some level 2 units. But certainly someone who's coming in at GCSE level without experience of the workplace, that apprenticeship at level 2 gives us a real opportunity to give them those basic skills, that introduction to the world of work, as well as starting them at that appropriate level in their learning.
So that's, I think a really comprehensive overview. Really delighted that Crystal's kind of worked through the mechanics of that. I think in short, anyone who hasn't got some double entry prior to joining the workplace, I think we're going to be looking at much more likelihood of a full level 2. I mean, at the moment, we get quite a lot of high achieving A-level students who haven't done accounting, haven't done business studies, but they're very sharp, maybe getting 3 A's in, maths and economics and other subjects. And if you parachute them in at level 3, they probably cope because they're bright and they pick stuff up quickly. That is going to be more challenging for those individuals, particularly, as we've said, in light of this last year or two of the educational experience they will have had. So we are, as we said, we're envisaging a higher proportion of students doing the full level 2. Now, one thing to bear in mind is that if you are bringing AAT students in autumn this year, which I'm sure a lot of you will be, if you're bringing them in sort of September, October 21, they've got time to finish their first level under ACCA 2016. They've got time to complete their first level under the current qualification. And actually, that does have that duplication of learning, duplication of assessment. So actually, you could kick that can down the road a bit and not worry about it until they progress from that level up to the next level, when they will be on Quals 22. And what Crystal's working on at the moment internally is we will be providing support, we'll be providing additional resources and additional teaching to fill any of those knowledge gaps. Because you can imagine if somebody goes from level 3 ACCA 2016 to level 4 Quals 22, they won't have seen these themes that were introduced. They won't have seen the sustainability, the ethics in the same way. They won't have seen the business awareness, business environment stuff. They won't potentially have seen costing in much detail. So we know we're going to have to put in some support measures at that point to help students who are transitioning. But it's more for those students. If any of you will be bringing in AAT students early in 2022, that I think is going to be a much bigger question around, do we just stick them straight onto Quals 22 from the outset, which then some of these knowledge gaps are going to become more problematic for those youngsters. Don't know if you've got any sort of anything to add, Zoe, because I'm conscious you need to leave us at past, don't you?
Yes, excuse me. No, I just think that it's going to be really important to be able to keep the communication up with all of your representatives at FI to be able to help you to talk through this, because it is about just making sure that you're looking at the candidate as an individual as well as the job role that they're going to be doing, in order to be able to identify which is going to be the better training pathway. And the one, like Gareth said, it's about trying to help them to succeed, to give them a really good grounding, to help them enjoy the experience and to build their confidence as they pass their assessments, so that they can then take that knowledge through then onto their professional qualifications as they progress on the CIMA and ACCA or whichever route they're going. So yeah, it's just about kind of identifying the fact that it's not a one-way fits all, but just looking at which is going to be the best pathway for the individuals that you're going to have coming through.
Thank you, Zoe. And obviously we will be, myself and other members of the senior FI team will be talking in lots of detail to individual employers around this over the coming months and even the next couple of years. So, any particular points anyone wants to pick up, you can contact myself, Ben, Lucy, the Tim in Norwich and Ipswich. You can contact your usual contacts to go through that in detail. And as I said, we're as interested to hear employer feedback as you are to hear this sort of stuff from us, in terms of what that might do to your recruitment, what it might do to your entry points. We had an employer on the December session that we did this, who does do a shortcut level 3 into level 4. So they do at the moment AAT in less than 2 years. And they went away from this saying, actually, we can see most of our new recruits doing all of level 2, which I was very surprised at, because they would not normally have used level 2 at all. Obviously, that will have an implication for timescales, and it's something Crystal is particularly working on at the moment, is if a school leaver does do all of level 2, what does that do ultimately for a journey to full level 7 qualification, which is where a lot of these youngsters will end up doing their ICAEW or their ACCA or their CIMA. So we're looking at what that overall journey will be. But I guess you then need to consider what's the downside to it being longer, particularly if everyone else is doing it longer. It's not like, some employers are going to still be able to use the old quick qualification. And history shows that the longer students spend doing AAT and their subsequent qualification, the more loyal they are to those employers. You generally find that they're stickier as employees. So maybe you'll get not only more years out of them while they're training, but they may then have a higher likelihood of staying. I know there are potential issues with the charge out rates they would therefore be getting at any given point in that journey if they're not qualifying quite as early. So I'm conscious. I know Zoe's got to leave us, and in fact I know Crystal is phenomenally busy and has to be elsewhere very shortly. So I'm happy to hang around. I'm sure some of the other senior management team are happy to hang around. But does anyone, Crystal, do you have anything you want to add just to tail off your presentation?
Just to pick up on Helen's question actually about computer marked and written questions added, we've got very similar to what we've currently got. So there are some modules which are, or some units which are computer marked and results were available fairly soon after, and we've still got some that will have an element of human marked. So at level 2 and level 3, there are still human marked elements, but not for all units. At level 4, all of those units do have an element of human marked. So we're looking at that sort of longer period to results again. So very similar to what we've currently got. I've popped my email address in the chat box. So if you have got any questions or queries about the Quals 22 or the level 2 apprenticeship and what that might mean for current students or new learners, do feel free to pop me a message. But I am going to head off now. So lovely to have seen you all this morning.
Thank you so much, Crystal, and thanks as well, Zoe, for joining us and giving your input. Really, really valuable. And thanks everyone for joining us. This is a discussion that will be evolving as the weeks and months pass. So do keep us informed with your own thoughts about how this might impact your own organisations. But as I said, I'm not in any rush to go anywhere. My daughters seem to not be killing each other at the moment, so all is calm in the John household. So I'm happy to loiter around. If anyone has got any questions or just feedback, I'm really interested to hear first reactions from anyone about how this might affect their own sort of journey for AAT students.